Hi, this is Carrie, and welcome to Tandem Talks, a podcast meant to empower you to live your life your way.
And I'm Craig. Join us as we go deeper with entrepreneurs and their journey creating success in business and life. Hello, welcome to another episode of Tandem Talks. We are here with a very special guest. Of course, all our guests are special, but we're particularly excited to talk to Nick Hughes. Nick is actually the founder and actually CEO of Cofounders Live. It's a global platform designed to take care of entrepreneurs. But in addition to that, he is a speaker, a writer. He's been a guest on many technology shows across the globe. He's also been an investor and an advisor on a lot of different firms. I can name them all. There's Calling It, Seconds, CoinMe. These are all firms that he's either had a hand in or founded, as well as, I'm guessing, many others. So we feel excited to have you on board today. I'm sure there's a lot of patterns and different trends you've seen, people starting businesses, side hustles, how to do it well, how to do it wrong, common mistakes and common things, people are able to excel at. So we'll get into all that, but maybe just anything you want to add to your background, or maybe kind of how you got into the game of business ownership, or a little bit on like why you're in the game of business ownership versus, the standard employee 9-to-5 job type lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. I've had a number of projects over the last, decade, and, I've helped a lot of other entrepreneurs, whether it's advisory or just kind of coming in and helping them get going. So, with Founders Live, again, we are an early stage. We focus on early stage entrepreneurs and startups globally. And we're really this community and marketplace that highlights the emerging startups. And, we have a digital aspect, the community and, resources, talks, education, and all that. But then, it actually really started in Seattle with events. And I created these. It was fun events, but the very first event was March of 2014. And even that very first event was a pitch competition. So it still remains today that one of our main kind of heartbeats of the brand and the experience is these really fun pitch competitions that highlight early stage startups. The unique thing about the competitions are each founder, so it's called Founders Live, each founder has 99 seconds only to really get on stage and formulate their pitch. There's 4 minutes of questions from the audience after that. 5 presenters go in that fashion, and then the crowd will vote on a winner of that event. And those were in person. We flipped into virtual when the pandemic hit, but we focus a lot on that early aspiring entrepreneur that is building either a technology focused company or, other types of businesses. So it's been really fun.
Yeah. Congratulations. And that sounds like such a fun project to work on, right? Like just a lot of enjoyment, a lot of excitement, a lot of energy, a lot of people with ideas that you're supporting. Let's talk just a little bit, if we take a couple steps back, because I would love to have like a 10-hour conversation with you about that specifically, because I just did a pitch for 5 minutes for a technology firm that's doing really well. I mean, things are going great. So I probably have like a million ideas and questions for you. But let's go back to the journey. Like if you think about the person sitting at home right now and they're like, yeah, I should do something. I should build something. Maybe they work in technology. Maybe they're a developer. They've got some random idea. Maybe they don't have an idea. What would you say is the best way to get in the game? And maybe what are some of the most common mistakes you see people make as they do get into the game that they're just not thinking ahead or not preparing for? What comes to mind for you? And I'm sure there's many, but give us maybe your top couple.
Yeah, there is a lot, and depending on, who you are as you're listening, you might, have a full-time or a more focused job or something that does pay the bills. And you're really thinking about either a side hustle or even, hey, I want to go and start my next real thing. Yep. First step is just immerse yourself in the community, in the information. So things like this, listen to these type of podcasts, obviously like attend things, whether it's virtual or in person, like get into the community. That's why it's things like Founders Live are all around the world, because we want to facilitate that that, energy and the education and the inspiration that then helps people take that next step. So really, immersing yourself is that. And then, next is obviously, got to really think about what it is that you want to create and what problems do you want to solve in the world. I might have even, asked this when we had our podcast conversation on the Founders Live podcast, by the way. I like to ask, like, what problem are you solving in the world? And that is something that everyone, if you're thinking about going into business and entrepreneurship, I would encourage you to come from that angle. So it's not just like an idea in the shower. It's actually like, hey, is there problems in the world that I want to solve or our team can solve in a unique way that people will pay for? And so that the next step is really like going through that, looking at what problems you want to solve in the world. And then how do you think you could do that, or your team could do that better, more efficient, maybe, more cost effective. And then you're going to start working on the really just going about building the team and building the solution and the product. And then lastly, I would just say, because there's so many, but I would just say this is figure out ways to test those assumptions and test, the target market. Are they needing the solution that you have? How do you get that user feedback and basically customer development, doing that in a pretty quickly, cost-effective way before you invest all this time, money, and energy into building something that maybe people don't want? So all this stuff there. But, those are like five, that's kind of like a 5-step framework to go from like, think I want to do something to proving out the solution problem set that you think you want to like work on.
Beautiful. I would echo all of those and agree with all of them. I want to ask one more question, then we'll let Carrie jump in.
I've got questions.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Carrie, you're in line. Okay. I'm first. So when you think about people getting going and they have to put that initial team together, actually, I want to double back on a quick point. One thing that I see is people doing all this research on Google, market research, but some of the best things is go talk to a business owner and say, here's my idea. Can I test this with you? Can I give you a free trial run? Like call it an MVP, whatever you want, so that then you can then get that feedback. Well, I might use this. I might pay for it. Here's what I might pay. Do that with a few business owners live in the real world versus all this academic research, which is really what you're pointing to, right, Nick, for folks?
Yeah. And, not to get down that rabbit hole, but, there's like certain questions that work well. And there's certain ones where you don't want to lead the witness, right? You don't want to be like, hey, you would use this, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Like you want to, through your questions and through your gathering of information with specific business owners, people, you want to, from a segment, probably 25, 50, 100, like in that realm, you want to get the data and the feedback enough to say, well, they need this. Here's another and last thing, and then I definitely want to hear from Carrie and her questions, but you can ask them, hey, if they have the problem, what are they using right now to solve that? And typically they're duct taping like, oh, well, we use like Google Sheets and we use like, Google Sheets, Google Forms and something else to like duct tape something that, man, if I could have something much more robust, and it would directly solve the problem with a lot more efficiency. That's what you're looking for is like, oh, we string this and this together. We would love to have something more holistic. And now they're actually already solving the problem, but they need something much better. So, yeah.
Well, I think that actually brings up another interesting point I wasn't planning on talking about, but this whole idea of developing your communication skills to be able to actually convey that message, I think is something a lot of business owners or aspiring business owners miss, especially if they're in a technical field. And so I would say if that's not your strength, find people who can decode and put things in layman's terms and make things relatable. Otherwise, I see so much missed opportunity. And I would also simultaneously be growing that skill yourself. So that over time, it's actually a strength and something that you're a rock star at. But doubling back on this whole idea of association and environment, I love the culture that you're creating. I think one thing that is difficult for some entrepreneurs, especially when they think of entrepreneurship as like solo entrepreneurship and like, I'm just going to go and do this all by myself. And there's a bit of like ego and arrogance sometimes around it. I think understanding the power of an environment has so much humility embedded in it, realizing, hey, I not only don't need to do this by myself, I likely can't do it by myself to the extent that I could if I was leveraging a community like Founders Live as an example. So one question it would be fun to hear you speak to is like, was there a space in your journey where you became humbled through the process and understood the actual value of what you built for other people to leverage, right?
Yeah, I have numerous stories on that, but I'm gonna pull out one that is pretty special. So I started Founders Live in 2014 in Seattle, Washington's kind of my home base. And roughly 2016, made some shifts, changes to really expand it, knowing that like, wow, if this works in Seattle, it's going to work in other places. And we've expanded to pretty much every continent. And we're in like 85 cities currently. And it's been an amazing journey, and a number of cities in Africa. And in 2019, I actually put all my stuff in storage. And originally it was, I'm going to tour for a year and go to like Founders Live cities and live and work with our teams in all these cities. And so that's what I did. Traveled like 75,000 miles that year. Whoa. And it just wasn't a year. It like continued. And then the pandemic hit, which I have stories on that. But I spent a month in Africa, and I went down into Harare. I went to Harare, Zimbabwe, and then I spent some time in South Africa. And, we've been in Harare, Zimbabwe for 3 years now. And so I had seen pictures of events and, some video, a little bit of events happening around the world. But when I was in Harare, Zimbabwe, and we had a Founders Live, and I was there, and it was kind of a big deal, and there was like 100 people, and basically I'm the only one that looks like me here over there, and they speak English, and it was all good, and we gathered and we had a Founders Live event. I mean, it was an event. There was music, there was food, there was drinks, 5 founders pitched, and they're up there. And at that moment, as I'm sitting all the way across the world looking around, this thing is happening just like it was happening in Seattle. This thing is happening. It happens every month. They're entrepreneurs. They're sharing their vision in the world. I mean, that moment was realizing to me that entrepreneurship is everywhere. It's like a human desire. I'm no better than them, and they are intelligent in their ways and amazingly. And it was just beautiful. And, it was very emotional. It was touching, like just realizing that, what I had created had reached all across that world. And yet, like, I know, like, I'm the CEO, and like it was fun for them. I get that. But we're just all there celebrating entrepreneurship. And that's what it was, just very, very touching. It was very
just
striking.
A bunch of human beings coming together.
Trying to create a better world.
That's the key. And in a better world, a better world in Harare, Zimbabwe is different than a better world or whatever that vision is in New York, but it's equally great. And that's what we represent. And, you could talk about all these other countries that we're in, but when you look at that, like we empower and inspire and drive growth for entrepreneurs, because that's this world runs because of entrepreneurship. Like that's like for Zimbabwe to like move forward and be continually successful in the future is because of the entrepreneurs that are building the next things that they need, and so that was just, that's it.
Yeah, that's amazing. We've definitely had that like magic moment. We've done a lot of business in Kingston, Jamaica, random cities in England, all over. And just that, like, you're like, wow, you just took like an 8-hour overnight train to come to this workshop. Like, just the sacrifice and the work habit and just the bigger dream that drives the entrepreneur on a global scale is just like really, really something to be experienced, I think. Yeah, and one awesome. Very big benefit of travel, of course. So I've got a lot of follow-up questions, but I'll bounce pass it over to you.
Okay, sure. So let's talk about, let's go back to a little more tactical. Although we can also riff on everything you're saying. I think a lot of people sitting there, if you do have the full-time job or you're afraid of entrepreneurship, don't be afraid, just learn, get in the community, get around people. Just because it exists doesn't mean, like, to get into the entrepreneurial game, you don't have to invest $500,000 or $100,000 or even 10 grand. You can get in the game. So just like go out and explore. And what I think is also cool is it's really about solving problems, but it's about the creativity to solve the problem, right? Like, and then building a system to creatively solve a problem. Engineers do the same thing. They're just doing it with maybe a physical object, right? But let's talk a little more tactical in terms of putting a team together, because I think a lot of people we're not all complete human beings. Usually the technician is not also the leader or the communicator, could be. Or they're a bad manager. They're kind of these different strength zones we tend to fall into. How do you recommend people start to put that initial team together? And how do you vet people? Because there's a lot of great people out there. There's a lot of marginal, and there's obviously a few bad people. And, we've kind of seen the spread in our career. Like, what have you done, or what would you advise someone getting going to do when they're putting that initial group together?
Right. First off, knowing your skill set, knowing what you're great at. I've been recently going through some different, courses, and some people have been working with me around, just really even what you would call like your pinnacle gift or your gift, right? And everyone is gifted in actually pretty narrow ways, like but everyone has some very specific things that, they do probably the best in the world. So I would say first and foremost, hopefully you're able to know or discover what you're really great at. And hey, if you're technical, you're probably great at, coding and building the product and kind of, visualizing that and putting it into play. Some people are the idea people, which that's great and fine, but you need someone to actually build the product. So if you're like a creative thinker, and wouldn't it be great if, and you're an idea person, but you're not technical. So it's time to like put those ideas in together, but you gotta find the rest of the team that can help, manifest that product, or whatever that, software, the product, that sort of thing. So, knowing your talents and knowing what you're great at. Secondly, really starting to write out, what would that initial kind of dream team look like? And you just dream it. It's like, okay, if we had like 5 people and I'm here and I need this, and this, I would suggest start doing that, so for like a technical, or let's just like assume for a second that this is more of a something that is going to build like software. It's going to be some sort of technical associated thing. Well, you need to have someone that builds it. You need to have someone that, maybe designs it, or maybe / kind of helping with, the visual representation, the UI. And those are different. Someone that codes it, not necessarily the one that actually visually puts the great design and UI and UX around it. So it's a designer. And then lastly, you have someone that is more of a salesman or kind of leads the business, right? So business person, technical, building the product, someone to make it look good. Those 3 things are a good start. Now, that doesn't mean that's the only 3 that you need, but to kind of take an idea from like, that going back to what we were talking about earlier, where you're testing it and now you're kind of getting that early version of the product together, the minimum viable product, however you want to say it, that's probably the core team. And then, a great question on, what do you look for, or like,
how do you vet out at least the really bad people, or find the talent, right?
I'm not the expert, but what I can say, I've worked with a lot of people, and what I can say is that definitely people are going to, especially if you build something that does have some attractiveness and it's grown, I get approached a lot. And I think like you can start putting in little hurdles. Basically like, okay, you can reach out to me, but like even in your response to an email, have them do a little work, like a little homework.
Right.
Guarantee that weeds out 1/2 to 3/4 right there. So what is homework? Like, hey, great. Can you write up like a 1 page, literally 1 page, write up
executive summary. Yeah.
Like literally executive summary of what do you see with our company and how do you see yourself adding value? Like that takes half an hour to an hour of work. If someone thinks deeply, and the majority of people don't do that. Right. So give them a little homework, give them a little hurdles. Then secondly, having numerous conversations, vetting out. And, I know, Carrie, you mentioned this, but, I would just encourage people to get as in touch as possible. Like when you have a phone call or a Zoom call or whatever, you're going to feel it. Do I trust this person? And those are like very immediate, knee-jerk reactions, but those are your intuition telling you something. Yeah. So if you're like, I don't know what it is, but I have a weird feeling every time I get on a call with that person, probably not the right person to work with. And I can be honest with you here, there's someone within our team that kind of meets that requirement. And I'm having a problem, and I'm not saying our internal team. It's like with Founders Live, we have like internal team in very like the tight circle group. Yeah. And then we have our city leaders and our people that work around the world. There's like almost 100 people around the world that are on our, kind of leadership. Yeah. They're ambassadors or volunteers. They're not like paid, compensated full-time positions, but we get a lot of people. And, I have this happen a lot where you're just like, what is that? And that it's like telling you like, this is not the right fit. And, I have a hard time sometimes like saying, hey, it's not the right fit. This just, I don't know if you're like that too. So I would just encourage people to listen to your intuition. And a lot of times it's correct. And then the last thing I would say is, giving people like initial like projects, like you can kind of baby step into a longer relationship with like, hey, let's work like 90-day, let's work on this. And maybe it's compensated or maybe it's not, but like test project, right? And if it works really well, awesome. Like let's continue. So you can baby step into that relationship instead of one night stand. And all of a sudden you're like, oh no, like, I don't know if this is right or not.
Well, and it's amazing how the right people will just over deliver.
Step up. Yeah.
They just over deliver. We've seen that it's like, wow, that person is like, that we've given them like such little comp or such little equity and they're like producing such amazing stuff. And then other people, it's like so marginal. And you're like, you have to motivate them to like do a project. It's like, that's not a good sign for your inner team.
Not a good long-term.
Well, and, I think it also, sometimes we zoom right over this and, I think asking like, what are they really looking for? Right. What do they need? Some people are fishing hard for a full-time paid job, which of course, like I get it.
Yeah.
Some people don't need that at all. And they just want to be associated with this like really great brand and company. And they want to work for this leader. They want to work with them. And so digging a little deeper on the motivations and what is exactly the reason, like what do they need? Sometimes they don't even they actually don't know either. But I think as a leader, and we all are, as a leader, it's important for you to dig a little bit, because the more you can surface from the people that want to do like work with you and join your team, the better you can serve them. And it's so easy to skim right over that. Because we don't, we might be nervous to ask the question. We might be in a hurry to get things going.
We assume they want what we want, right?
Yeah. And honestly, like that's where things break down, is when you don't even know like what do they really want? Like, what do they want? Hey, what do you want to get out of this? Right. What does success look like for you? And like, hey, like in 2 years, what would you like your life to look like? Would you still want to be associated with this company? It's totally cool if not, but like, let's map out what works for you and let's both get there, but we need to know like what best serves you so we can like match that. And I think those questions aren't asked a lot of times.
Well, and I think there's this element of creating a culture of deeper transparency where the traditional job interview, the interviewer is kind of trying to pitch some dream position for the candidate, and the candidate's full of bullshit, kind of just feeding them. They know exactly what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So it's how do we create a way better dynamic where we're all just really transparent about like what the expectations are, what it's going to look like and feel like to be part of a certain role or part of a team culture. And, even in our experience, that's the best way we've been able to build long-term partnerships. And also having the confidence to know that it's okay to have to invest more time on the front end into finding the right candidate versus settling for the first, dozen people that show up or email you. And I'm going to guess that a lot of entrepreneurs in their infancy don't have the same level of confidence as you do at this stage, Nick, where you do have like a very strong filtration process, even from the get-go on getting emails, but to actually invest into that process, because the right fit, you can't replace the right fit. You can't even simulate it or dream it up. But when you have the right person in the right role, that's where the magic happens. So
yeah. And look, I would just, for someone that's just starting out, and if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't have a filtration process, just create 3 steps. Like, that's a really good start. 2 steps maybe, but create just a few things that can be a good start of your filtration process, and you'll just build from it and it'll evolve from there. But just having a couple of those steps is 10 times better than not having any and then not really knowing. And, I've seen founders, founding teams, and now we're going into like literally co-founders. By the way, like that is almost as serious as, getting married. And I see these teams get going like so quickly. And, it's like, oh, I got to go I need to find a co-founder. I would encourage you to, of course, it's important to have a founding team and co-founders, but that is a very, very serious relationship that's a bit harder to unwind. And so have that filtration process, kind of know who you're looking for, and be confident in actually saying, that's not the right time. And it's okay.
Yeah. Or to your point, just give them a little project to kind of work on, see how badly they want it. Right. One thing I do just want to add to this is, what does their work history look like? Because that will be telling. And if somebody's maybe just out of school or something, you're not going to have a lot to work with, but is there some level of continuity or accomplishment, or is it every year they're bouncing onto something? And so you don't really have any gravitas, or they don't really have any like proven results. Cause like I brought in partners who have established, they're multi-deca millionaires, and I've seen them build many businesses. So it's like, dude, let's pay them to even be involved. When other people, it's like no establishment. It's like, maybe they need to pay us and invest to be involved. Right. And so depending on their background, you can really create the right leverage for the firm.
Yeah, I would just add to that. If you haven't been here before, people, when you get to that point, there's going to be there's this reaction of, if someone approaches you and they're excited about your project, you get excited too. And you're like, oh my gosh, this person wants to join and help. And be aware and have caution at that moment that, again, now you create your filtration process and you have those steps, but, just know, just as Craig said, like, look at their history. Is this person just fishing for a job and like somehow to create some quick income, or are they, how passionate are they about the vision and the market you're in? Do they have past history of either working in this industry or building a product of some sort of similarity? Have they created a product before? Have they brought something to market? Do they have an exit in their history? These are things that you start filtering out and kind of doing that. It doesn't mean that you say yes or no. You just need to know your filter. Who are you looking for? But trust me, it is like you kind of get drunk on that sometimes, where they're like approaching you and you're like, oh my gosh, these people want to help. And I've made that mistake where you just accept their energetic and their excitement to join the team. And then you don't realize, oh, this actually is not the best fit. I've made those mistakes.
I mean, I think that describes like most people's early dating history. I mean,
exactly.
It's like the perfect analogy.
Yeah, nice parallel.
Then you realize what you actually really want in your 20s and you go find it.
Totally agree. So the co-founder entrepreneurial aspect and dating are incredibly similar in weird ways. It's strange.
It is. And I people need to experience it to feel it, but I hope they go on a little faith that we're absolutely speaking truth on that. So great. Let's maybe move as we start to wrap up here, because there's so many different directions that we could go. But I always like to ask people, what are things that you've learned or changed recently? I mean, what's hot for you? What are you, maybe even if you want to talk about the marketplace, you can, but I'd say almost like personally, like, what have you been like, man, I did this wrong, now I'm doing it this way. I mean, what maybe comes to mind, or again, trends that you're seeing a lot of people make changes on?
I'm gonna take an interesting angle here, because it's fresh on my mind from yesterday.
Yes, I love it.
One of my coaching sessions, with one of my coaches, we really talked about, and this is going to come across really strange, everyone. And I just think I want you to grab the wisdom here. We talked about patience and longevity, and actually, like, I think this is assuming something's been created and in something like Founders Live that just kind of continues to pop all over the world. It's easy to get so wrapped up in the world is moving really fast, and you feel like you have to, if you're not achieving something today, you're behind, and you're getting left behind, and you're struggling, and you're not being successful. And honestly, the long-term view, like the long haul, like, are you in it for the long haul? And if you're in it for the long haul, I'm talking about 40 years. Like, I've been working on this for 8, and we're somewhere now, and it's great, and I can pat myself on the back, but we're nowhere near where I know Founders Live and myself and our team can really impact. And if you look at another 30, 40 years, just having patience on some things, that the world will bring it back to you. If you're sitting there like, it's not happening fast enough, have patience. Weirdly enough, actually, success in the longevity of life is just keep, staying in the game and waking up every day and doing your thing. And if you do that for 30, for 40 years, you will end up at the top of the top of like the echelon of the world, because no one does anything for 40 years, right? So if you have a great craft, you have a great business, and you just keep working it and keep building it, 30, 40 years, you will be amazing. Like, you will be one of the best in the world at what you do. Instead of like, I worked on that for 3 years and I quit. And then I'm going to do this next business. I'm going to work on it for 3 years and quit. You haven't established any momentum and any like in IP or wisdom of like the business, or like brand recognition globally. Like, we're in Africa, like, hello, and who else in Africa is going to discover Founders Live over the next 40 years? Well, probably everyone, like, if you think about that, like, so have staying power, look in the long term, and in terms of your commitment to the path. Maybe your business is not going to last 40 years. I don't know, but be committed long term, and a lot of good things are going to happen.
Yeah. 1,000%. There's a few break points in business that we see again as patterns. There's that, like, have an idea to like actually creating revenue. And then the next break point is like cash flow. Like, I can break even, I can survive. Then you get to a point where eventually you start to grow exponentially, because your current clients are happy. They're referring other clients, and you have money to market, and you can hit this growth curve and this spike. And a lot of people quit before that spike hits. Right. Yeah. And so they do all the hard work and then they tap out or they back off. And we see that I've seen that across so many industries. And so it might not be 40 years, it might be 5, it might be 10, but there is a game. And I mean, you can see it in people who are financial planners or accountants or whatever. I mean, it's just at some point they just start to become wealthy and create that success and impact because of that staying power. So what that timeline is, you can define and try to modulate, but
I totally agree. Yeah. And, I think like the next thing I would say off that, my thoughts and my advice, there are, there's segments of those years and there's ups and downs and there's turbulence. And, we've been in this pandemic that has affected everyone in various ways. So, okay, whatever that is for you. But what I'm simply saying is, have patience for the long haul. And then, kind of acutely being focused on certain things. And you're right, there's phases and you want to really recognize where you're at in that and know what is that next step for kind of jumping across the canyon to the next phase. And, there's many things involved in there. And, but I think like, starting and quitting every 2 to 3 years it's not a great habit to get into. It takes a while for any great thing in the world. Trust me, it takes a long time. And it also takes a lot of people and it takes a vision that people want to get behind. So what is that vision and why does it matter to them? Those are the things that you want to ask yourself as you build out what not only your business, but what your company and your brand is and how does it attract people?
Well, and I love, Nick, the whole idea of playing the long game, being patient. It's the advice people don't want to hear, but I think deep down, we know that that's what has to happen, but we're naturally not very good at it. We're distracted. We have so many options and opportunities or perceived options.
Yeah.
Plus people aren't hearing podcasts by, Nick Hughes in year 1, when you're like pounding it out and you're not successful yet. Like they hear you now. And we all then have this perception of like, success is really easy. Like we just go to Zimbabwe and have fun and like meet all the people.
These emotional moments of.
Yeah. So I think what would be kind of cool is just to hear maybe like what, like the work ethics, right? Like, what have you been doing the last 8 years to get to where you are today? Because that to me is the real meat for the aspiring entrepreneur, right?
Yeah. And I go back to one of my other coaches, like really right when Founders Life started, he really helped me establish, and we just don't have enough time to go deep into it, but it was a bit of a scaling process, literally a process. So great timing of the question, because one of the heart of it is I do yearly and quarterly, kind of reviews and then planning for the next year. I'm right there right now. We're at the end of 2021 here. So I take usually the last few weeks and, you look at your numbers, and the end goal here is that you isolate a short list of priorities and milestones that you want to reach next year. And then I break those down into quarters, and you can then break those down into months, and you can break those down into weeks. And so the point though is these are the 5 areas that we're going to accomplish next year. You literally write them out. You've heard about writing out your goals and all that stuff. Well, do it. And more importantly, put it into a system. So, with these high level goals and really so it's a whole kind of process and the thought process and what they call the quarterly rocks. But these rocks are your milestones that you want to like reach, and you quantify them. And those are your yearly things. And then you back them up into quarters, and then you can actually list. The end result is you're pulling back, and on your calendar, you should be working in the areas that move the business forward for those milestones and growth goals. Right. So I look at that and I feel like that's what I did. So, from early on when we decided to like grow Founders Live, I had like the yearly but quarterly goals and milestones of like how many cities we want to launch this quarter. And it was just like, And we're not at all where I want to be, but we're definitely somewhere, right? And so when you look back, you're like, oh my God, like at how many quarters and how many years? And I'm doing that right now for the next year. What do we want to accomplish next year? And wow, when you put those numbers out and you put these KPIs, you put the things that you want to accomplish out there, you're thinking about them, you review them on a weekly, if not monthly basis. Every quarter, you then have a half a day that you review what we did this last quarter and update and enhance those numbers. And you just track along the year. And I'm telling you, just that, you will move forward and be successful because you're basically tracking and not obsessively, but you have the things you want to accomplish every year. And you can do this for your personal life too, but okay. And it's not that we're going to do 20 things. These are all the things, right? 5. And sometimes I slip the 6th one in there. Okay.
The sub point 5B.
Yeah.
5 is
and probably if you hit the top 3, you'll survive. Right. And if you don't hit the top 3, you won't survive. Right. And then as you add on, it's just the nice to haves too. Right?
Exactly. And, it's personal and specific to Founders Live, but, like we have like cities, we have what we call our fan base. So like the fans that we reach around the world, that's, officially about 65,000. Unofficially, we reach about 150,000 people around the world. Again, that's not large, but that's significant. Yeah. And we're excited to see that go much larger. But, revenue numbers, how many events that we have a year, those sort of things. And you map those out. And if those are important to your business, whatever your metrics are, you start putting those in like a casing and then you work backwards. And now you can see like, hey, are we tracking on that each month? And I feel like weekly, like I don't get obsessed with data like on a daily basis, really. For me, it's weekly review and then monthly review and quarterly review. And then trust me, you do that for a few years, your life will never be the same.
Yeah. 1,000%. And to your point, we can do it in every area of our life. So thank you for spending time with us, Nick. I do feel like this podcast could be 12 hours, but for sake of everyone's life and time and happiness, we should cut it, wind her down. Where can people find you? How do they get a hold of you? How can they support your cause with Founders Live or otherwise? I mean, obviously you do a lot of advising, but I think Founders Live is really your big baby at this point, right? Yeah.
founderslive.com. Check that out. We're making some cool enhancements at the turn of the year for a lot of our digital community and all that and the things that we offer. So, check that out. If you go to founderslive.com, you will find our stuff and our community and all that. And then, I'm on LinkedIn, Nick Hughes. If you search me, you'll find me. And then, I don't know, Twitter. I'm less active on like Facebook and Instagram these days. Just, I'm busy, and as well as like I try to take care of the emotional and psychological area. So
I think you got to have a couple of social media platforms, and after that, unless you've got a staff of 40 people, you got to kind of let go, right?
We're very, YouTube, a lot of our, like we live stream all of our events. We have videos of all this kind of cool stuff and talks on YouTube. So check us out, Founders Live on YouTube. But hey, feel free to, reach out to me and ask questions, or, I do have limited capacity, but I'd love to help out founders where I can. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. And we talk a lot about, bringing people closer to what matters most. And I think, a lot of the topics and even Founders Live, it is about like really helping people get into the entrepreneurial game and not only get in it, but like stay in it and win versus just kick some dust up and then quit and go back to the day job. Right. So thanks so much for your empowerment and what you're doing across the world. It's so beautiful. And like, we're excited to figure out how we can support you or maybe be involved in some way too. So
yeah, absolutely. Like, yes. And then secondly, maybe we make these a little more frequent conversations, because I do think there's about, there's more than 12 hours of content or thoughts and advice that we can share. So let's, I would love to be back here, and maybe we can kind of trade podcast sessions over time.
Yeah, I love it. That sounds great. Well, appreciate you, Nick. And I hope everyone took some good notes. I'm excited to double back on some of this, and definitely across any industry, so much tangible takeaways. So appreciate you. I hope you have a good rest of the day out in Seattle. And I hope everybody enjoys the grind. Take care. Thanks for listening to today's episode.
Please subscribe and leave a review, and be sure to visit tandemconsulting.co/talks.